Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. Happy Monday. I'm so glad that you guys are tuning in for another episode of The Thinking Project. And before I introduce my phenomenal guest today, I wanted to let you know about following me on social media, joining the newsletter and all that good stuff, and my new locals community, which is $5 a month, where you get early access to these videos and live weeklies with me and a networking community that you just can't beat. $5 a month, along with my sales training program. There's a lot of cool things going on, a lot of really amazing people to meet. So join that. All the links will be in the description below. And without further ado, let me introduce Daniel Adams, who is the premier relationship coach. We had an amazing conversation. I've known Daniel for a while. This podcast has been on the books for a minute, and we finally got it done to bring you guys an amazing conversation. So with all that being said, Daniel Adams, and thank you so much for tuning in. Enjoy and share with your friends. All right, Daniel, we're rolling. Thank you so much for being here.
100%. Thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. We've been trying to make this happen for a while, mostly on my end. So I appreciate that we finally got it done. Really grateful for that.
Totally. It's good to be here with you, Dalton.
Absolutely. Well, great, dude. And I'm excited because I know what you do. I know, we've talked in the past quite a bit. And I think it's really interesting that you choose to focus on, and you can tell me, and I'll let you tell in your own words, but premier relationship coaching for small business owners to free up all that energy. Tell me more about that and tell me, what that entails.
Start with this. Every problem and every solution is deeply tied to a relationship. Whether that's relationship with self, whether that's relationship with my understanding of God, whether that's relationship with spouse, whether that's relationship with clients, whether that's relationship with my kids, relationship with vendors, relationship with YouTube, Facebook, wherever we're live today, right? Everything
Right.
is created through relationships. Every problem is rooted in a relationship. Every solution is rooted in a relationship. And my wife was actually telling me today, she's like, are you really going to tell people that you're the premier relationship coach in the marketplace? And I was like, yes, I am.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because this is the premier destination to free up emotional capital. What do I mean by emotional capital? Everybody's aware of financial capital, and we've got all the pie charts of where are you budgeting your money?
Yes.
For overhead, for all the things, right?
Right.
What I'm noticing is everybody also has a bank of emotional capital where my time and my energy and what I think about all the time gets budgeted. Most people are unaware where their biggest allocations are going of their emotional capital.
Yeah.
And especially for small business owners, because to pretend that my personal life doesn't affect what's happening in my business, and to pretend what's happening in my business doesn't affect my personal life, this is one of the biggest fallacies out there, right? How long can we hide? Can't happen.
That's true. Yeah, that's accurate. Yeah, I agree with that.
So what I love to do for small business owners is just get super clear on this emotional capital. What's in my space? What are key relationships? How are those looking? What's my key relationship with self? The metrics there. Am I telling the truth? Am I keeping my word? Am I committing to more than I can handle? Am I over-promising and letting the ball drop? Is that a habit for me that probably is going to show up in my revenue too? Or am I under-promising and over-delivering consistently? And I bet that's going to show up in profit, right? And that's what I guide small business owners through, is just looking at these micro habits and examining these relationships to see where we're clean and what needs to get cleaned up. And this is the biggest breakthroughs I see. Because for so many small business owners, A, they just want to help people. B, they're doing it for their families in the first place. So when their families are a mess, it's well, why the hell am I doing all this stuff,
Yeah.
Like, I'm
Couple
doing it
things.
all for my family, and my family's the one complaining I'm never home. Like, this is jacked up.
Mm,
I did this for time
mm,
and money freedom. I did this because God inspired me to make this business. I did this because I wanted to make a difference. I did this because I want to work for myself. I did this because I want to help people. And it's like, yeah,
yeah.
we got to get you free so you can help, and so your home life can be awesome too. So that's what we
Yeah.
guide people through.
Yeah. Man, there's a lot to unpack in that, right? Because
Fire hosing.
yeah. Well, it's just there's a lot to like really go into. One of the first things when you were talking at the beginning is like emotional banks. And that's something that I learned in sales. And that's and just about like emotional deposits. And before you can start asking people, you gotta like, you know what I mean? You gotta give,
Right.
and there's gotta be something to take before you can like ask, right? And that so I love that. I also love the fact and totally agree with you in the sense that I used to hear that early on in my sales career. Like we were in a dog eat dog set. We were on the sales floor of a ruthless industry and a ruthless company. And they would just be like, listen, you got problems at home, leave like, and they would like pretend like you got a bag on your shoulder and leave it at the front door. Because when you come in here, right. And I'm just like, how does that work? Cause like,
Right.
I know no one's doing that. I know nobody's doing that.
Like, how can humans like, we can compartmentalize all we want, but like,
Sure.
it's just not how humans work.
No.
It's not how we're
Because
wired.
no, and it just removes a lot of like empathy from the situation, you know what I mean? And it just yeah, you're right. It like just kind of dehumanizes everybody. Like you're just like none of that matters. And so yeah, I've never really agreed with that. But let me ask you this. So I guess we can dive right into that question, right? How do you remedy that in the sense that you talking with small business owners, they have to, I mean, how do you navigate this? Because I'm sure it's not a quick thing, right?
For some people, it can go pretty quick. Often there's
Okay.
like layers
Yeah.
and layers and layers of this. And like, we'll handle one layer and then we'll come back around. They're like, hey, I thought we handled this. Like, you totally did. And there's another round of it to handle here at a deeper level. So like, both are true.
Yeah.
Part of the method to this is, one, I got to get real comfortable telling the truth. This is in the small things. This is in the
Yeah.
big things, right? Because we've got all these taboos about money, right? Is
Right.
it really appropriate to like say how much money you make or how much money you spent or whatever,
Right.
right? It's like there's all this taboo about debt, about earnings, about whatever.
Yeah.
Sex and pleasure is the same way. And we've got this massive pornography thing going on where we're pretending like 85% of people are not using it in this $14 billion industry.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right though.
So like, there's this culture of like,
Yeah, I read
every
a book. Yeah, I read
please.
a book called Everybody Lies.
Dude, yes.
It's a marketing book, right? But he's like the one of the ones was about, sex, and he's like 80% of women say they use condoms and 50% of men say they use condoms, but like condom sales are like way down, and he's like somebody's lying because the number.
There's a gap here.
Yeah. I
You know
was
what I mean?
like,
And it's
dang.
subtle lies, dude. Like when my wife says, hey, you want anything from the store? And in my mind, I'm like, yeah, I want some strawberries. I want you to buy 2 ribeyes. I'd love for you to grab some more barbecue sauce. But like I say, nah,
Right. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
this mini lie. And like, how many of those do I have in a day? Right. And back to this key
Yeah.
relationship, like I'm not telling the truth in these little ways, and that shows up in big ways. So
Mm,
it's not like, people have to like confess all their craziest stuff when we work together.
right.
And like there's a certain vulnerability that comes with these micro habits of just simply telling the truth. And so
So
many,
so yeah, go ahead.
I guess, just to overview, the method that you asked about. One's tell the
Mhm.
truth, 2 is get comfortable with emotion, and 3 is take
Mm.
massive action. So we can,
Yeah.
we're diving into the tell the truth piece. Um, Go ahead with your question. I'd love to come back to the
Yeah,
other
yeah,
two.
yeah, yeah. Well, actually, I'm glad that you finished because I don't remember that one. I probably wasn't supposed to ask it. So, but I think it's interesting. So get comfortable with emotions. That is something that I have always struggled with, and probably I feel like they're connected almost. And like being comfortable with honesty. And I was actually just talking to, all right, let's be vulnerable. I was actually just talking with a therapist about this earlier today,
So
about
good,
how
dude.
like, yeah, about how like there's a connection between being comfortable, or like being really comfortable with honesty, and then also being comfortable with the emotions. Because
Right.
like that's a tough, I think that's harder than being comfortable with on, like, because I can be honest, but am I ready for all of that, all of the emotion that comes with it?
That's what stops me personally from telling the truth.
Yeah, me too.
That's
Yeah,
that's what stops
100%.
my clients from telling the truth. That's what stops
Yeah,
whoever I'm talking to from telling the truth is like typically we're
yeah,
afraid of the emotion that will follow. Right? How
yeah,
many,
whatever the
especially
emotion.
small business owners, I don't want to
Yeah.
disappoint anybody. I'm in this to help people. I don't want to disappoint anybody.
Hmm. Yeah.
There's sadness in there, and that's uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, when I go to church, every single person that cries at church apologizes for crying.
Yeah.
Like we're not comfortable with sadness.
Sure. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
That's
like we need to hug whoever's crying as soon as possible so we can get them to not cry.
sure.
And there's cultural conditioning pieces to this.
Sure.
There's genetics to this, right? My brainstem is literally has a job to keep me safe, and emotion is not safe. Emotion is a threat.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's part of what complicates relationships, right? Especially for most dudes. It's like, life is simple. If I ask my wife if she wants to go on a date, like let it be simple. Let her say yes or no. But she might be like, well, yeah, I want to go, but I just started menstruating, so I don't really want to go right now. But we could probably go out to
Yeah.
eat somewhere. Where do you want to go to eat? And I say someplace, and she's like, no, we can't go there. And it's like, well, where do you want to
Yeah.
eat? Right. And there's this
And
whole
now we're,
exchange.
yeah, yeah. Now we're deep in this emotional.
Right. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
emotion is not safe. And then like, am I safe to really say what I really think and have that
Yeah.
be received? Right. Because like most men are programmed to see women be happy. And
Mm.
anytime that they're sad or angry or fearful or too happy, it's like, well, don't brag too much. Don't be a show off. Don't be cocky.
Sure. Yeah.
Emotion is so threatening. And so part of the awareness to raise is like, what if emotion was simply neutral and natural?
Yeah.
What if it's just
And
our inheritance as mammals?
right, right. Yeah, and I mean, I've come from a school of, and I've been doing this for a long time, but like a school of like Stoicism, where it's not about emotional control, it's about like management, and
Mhm.
they just come and go, right? You let the emotion stay as long as it needs to, and then you let it go whenever it's ready, right?
So
Um,
healthy.
yeah, yeah. So easier said than done, though, right? Like it took me a long time
Right.
to learn that principle, like longer
Oh,
than
and
I.
like, where's the high school class of like, how to manage your emotions? Like, that's not getting taught.
Sure, sure. Yes, we could. Yes, we could have a long discussion on.
Forget profit and loss statements and how to balance a credit card and what on earth compounding interest means. Like,
Sure. Yeah.
that class would be good too. But like, yeah,
Sure.
emotional resilience and,
Yeah. No kidding.
it's nobody teaches
What a
those skills. And our parents have no freaking idea. They just told us to
no.
stop crying because they
Yeah.
weren't ready. They didn't have the capacity to handle what we were going through. Right. Like, here's your show. Don't
Yeah.
cry.
Sure.
And so there's this movement, right? And like we've been trained both genetically by our brainstem trying to keep us safe and then conditioned to like not emote, you know?
Hmm.
For
Hmm.
most people, anger is a hurtful thing that hurts people. It's always somebody else's fault. It usually leads to violence and some kind of like big trauma. Like,
Hmm.
what if anger didn't have to be at somebody? What if anger could simply be neutral and natural? It's an expression. Like, there's no Hawaii without a really explosive volcanic event.
Right. Yeah.
Fire is like a natural part of creation. It's a natural
Yeah.
part of who we are to have anger. Does it have to be, it's the way
Yeah.
we express it that makes it healthy or unhealthy.
Right.
Is there a way to get in touch with my anger where it's not directed at somebody that results in pain?
Yeah. Yeah.
I
You
say
just
there
feel
is.
it. Yeah. 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 Well, and I would too. Like, I don't think really there's any. And by the way, like I've said this before on the podcast, but these like good is like a anger, good or bad. Like I think that's a label that probably we probably don't need to put on any emotion. Like, is happiness good or bad? Like, I don't know.
Right, like positive emotion, negative emotion,
Yeah, like
like
I don't
who
know if that's
decides? Like
yeah,
what if it's
exactly. Yeah.
just simply it's energy in motion? It's some kind of
Yeah.
expression wanting to live through us.
Yeah, yeah. I like that. And like emotions just one of those topics that I'm not super well versed on as like to the point I know enough to that like I've been able to you know, treat my emotions like a stage and just like, all right,
Mhm.
anger's there and it'll leave, and then we're done, right? Like I think my way of emotional management came from like a Buddhist story of pain and suffering. And that is like when they teach like this guy gets shot with an arrow and the pain is there, right? That would obviously hurt. But the suffering is like what the story you tell yourself about why you got shot with the arrow
Right.
and that's what we do with emotion. It's like I'm angry, but now I like why am I like or why did you make me like well, then we start getting into like really slippery dangerous
I'm
territory
trying to
there.
pin it on somebody or something or some
Right, it's
event, if
just got
it's
to
the
be some
government
justification.
or,
Yeah.
political thing A, B, or C or whatever, or my spouse did this or my kids did this or my parents
Sure.
jacked me up this way. And it's like all of that
Yeah.
blame is part of everybody lies.
Yeah.
Part of the antidote here is to come into full accountability for what I'm experiencing
Yeah. Yeah.
and simply tell the truth about it and trust that the people
Right.
around me can handle my full expression. And that's a decision.
Mhm. Mhm. So
That's
you
a
got to be
dis-
careful. Yeah, well you got to be then you got to be really intentional about who you keep around you then at that point, right?
100%.
Okay.
And also make sure I'm doing my own work in the mirror, that if like I need to go be angry, I'm going to go handle that. I'm
Yeah.
going to go to a
Okay.
rage room. I'm going to
Yeah.
call up a buddy. I'm going to go have a freak out in the car by myself. I'm going to
Yeah.
journal for 5 pages and scribble out whatever needs to be furiously scribbled. I'm going to turn on my Metallica and go for a run or go lift or whatever. And
Yeah.
like, I'm going to go do some BJJ or I'm going to go hit I started boxing recently. Like I'm going to go hit
Cool.
the heavy bag for a while
Yeah.
and like, let it move. Let Hawaii do its thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And all the seeds for paradise are there. And now I'm clear to come back to these key relationships with my kids, with my clients, with my spouse.
Yeah.
And now I'm clear. Now I know what I'm asking for. Now I know, what I mean? Because once the anger is gone, I can see again.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. What's up, everybody? This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Norm Wilkinson, the Happy Health Insurance Guy. You know that if you're a small business owner, entrepreneur, 1099 employee, finding the right health insurance can be a pain. Not anymore. With Norm, he is an entrepreneur, he is a business owner, so he understands the challenges that we all face every day with health insurance, with finding the right price, and that means that he's better equipped to help us all find the right coverage at the right price. So visit his website, thehappyhealthinsuranceguy.com, or give him a call at 801 687 9191 for a free consultation and policy review. Having a relationship oriented health insurance agent that will take the time to customize your coverage is amazing and not just another dude at a call center. So give him a call, 801 687 9191, or visit him at thehappyhealthinsuranceguy.com. Let him give you a policy review and a free consultation, and it'll be the best decision you ever made. Thank you so much for listening. Absolutely. So that's part of it. Those are the first two, and then massive action. But I'm curious. So for because you're absolutely right. I think that everything's connected. Like if we're small business owners, and I like what you mentioned about micro habits because one of the things I've learned, like coming up on episode 200 at the time this is recording, but
Let's
coming up on
go.
episode 200, yeah, this will be over 200 when it airs. And the one of the biggest lessons I learned doing my podcast was um, that the same things that make you successful in life make you successful in business. Like I've never heard anybody tell me anything different. They can try, but I'm usually like, yeah, but like it's not.
I've seen a lot. Like,
Yeah, I don't know about that. Yeah, so I'm just so curious. Like, when you talk about micro habits for small business owners, what are some of the key micro habits that you see or you try to develop that tell people this is successful?
One that comes up early and often is set aside time for yourself. When I
So
don't set
that's a
aside time for myself, I will take
oh
time from somebody else
oh yeah, all right.
every time.
Yeah.
And so micro habits for me mean the minute I roll out of bed, I turn on a meditation. 3 to 5 minutes does it for me. Shortly after that, I read something that inspires me. Could be a paragraph, could be 5 pages, could be a chapter, could be whatever. I journal about what I've noticed from my meditation and from my writings. And I drink some water. Miracle Morning's powerful, and Tim Ferriss has got, all the things about
Yeah.
productivity and Atomic Habits, right? Speaks to
Yeah.
this too. But the power of letting our habits be routinized. How many people forget to brush their teeth? It's not many. It's just you do it. You don't even think about it, right? There are things we can put on autopilot. And especially if we're setting aside time for ourselves to get fresh. Because every business owner has a heart like this big, which is why you got into business in the first place, is to help all these people. But you cannot give from empty shelves.
Yeah.
You got to have inventory. So set aside some time for yourself to have inventory. And if that's a 15-minute buffer before your lunch and after your lunch, do that. It's a micro habit. Tell somebody you'll be on a call 15 minutes later than you think. This is part of committing to less and nailing it. This is part of under promising and over delivering.
Yeah, man. That's one big thing that we talk about, time management, energy management, and I don't really use time management anymore. I actually got called out on this by a buddy of mine the other day, but it's about where you put your energy and being intentional with where you put your energy, right? um and so you talk about relationships, right? And having these relationships. So what do you look for in a positive relationship? So you have relationships with yourself, you have relationships with your business, you have relationships with your spouses and your friends and all these things. And I mean, at some point, does it become too much? Do you have to consolidate, or or does your micro habits govern all of these relationships? I'm curious.
That's a great question, man. Part of it, I think, different people are in different seasons.
Sure.
And sometimes when we look at that emotional capital graph, where's my time and energy going? Some seasons, it's 80% of my stuff's going into the business, right? Because we got this new build and we got this new project and we got stuff to get out the door, and we get to fulfill what we promised the clients.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it flexes back, right? We just had a spring break experience this weekend where my phone went in the drawer for the day. And it was just I'm not available. The only thing I'm available for in this moment is whatever my son has planned for spring break today. That's it.
Cool. Cool.
And if you're looking at my emotional capital graph, it's 100% my son Tanner.
Yeah.
And whatever he's planned for us today, which for him was some Mario Odyssey, and we got 87 Power Moons, and then he wanted to go to Dairy Queen, and then after Dairy Queen he wanted to go to Chick-fil-A, and after Chick-fil-A he wanted to go to Sonic, and he tried to crush more ice cream in a day than I've ever seen, and he totally did it. Get it, Tanner.
That's cool.
And so being flexible with their seasons, there are temporary seasons of imbalance for the business. There are temporary seasons of imbalance with spouse. There are seasons with kids. And, it's we can try and create the hierarchy, of well, is God first and then family, or is it family
Sure.
and then God? And then well, if I'm doing a worship thing, where does that fit? And where does business fit? And it's
yeah.
If I'm looking at this, there's always going to be
that's a good point.
Priority. But what if not everything has to be on a ladder? What if it's horizontal?
You're right.
You know what I mean? When I put when I'm super present with my wife, What if that act is building a little habit inside me that says I will also be really present with a client? Like if I build the habit to have one conversation at a time and complete it, that's going to ripple through business. That's going to ripple through my kids. That's going to ripple through my wife, right? If I'm trying to have 3 conversations all at the same time and I'm on my DMs all night and I'm trying to talk to my spouse and I'm trying to talk to my kids, like I'm doing neither of those 3 things well.
Yeah.
I'm shortchanging all of those people. So like, what kind of agreements can I put in place for like, okay, here's the time for complete and utter presence with spouse. Here's the time for complete utter presence with kids. Here is the time that I'm going to hammer DMs.
Yeah.
And to live in this way, it's like I'm not living like I'm running behind anymore. And this is going to show up in profit, I guarantee you. I'm living from this place of integrity, of telling the truth, of committing to less and nailing it.
Yeah. So committing to less, both like calendar wise and energy wise,
Right.
is what I'm hearing say, right?
What? Oh man, Christopher Stubbs. If y'all don't know Christopher Stubbs, go find Christopher Stubbs like immediately. I asked him to coffee for like 3 years, and he said no consistently. And it was like, it totally changed my life because it was the most compassionate thing I've ever experienced. It was always like, hey, I'm really honored you asked me. Right now, my bandwidth is really full. I'm deeply committed to a number of things and not right now.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just that. And it was given in love. And it was like the most refreshing no I've ever experienced. It felt so good.
Yeah.
And I deeply respect him to this day for just saying like, no, it's not a win for me right now. I'm committed to other things. It's like, oh
Yeah.
man, I can respect that. That like it was so inspiring to me.
Okay.
Like the
So
power
just
of
being
a compassionate no.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Huge.
yeah, just being totally upfront with people and just, kind of saying it how it is. I've gotten those too. I've gotten like, yeah, when I do my podcast, I try to go for whales every once in a while. I try to go for big guys, Gary Vaynerchuk, Seth Godin, Jay Shetty, Tom Bilyeu. Like I try to go for them, and I get no's all the time. And but yeah, and some are more compassionate than others.
Right.
But I get it. Like I never hate like. He said no. I'm not. I'm gonna stop listening to his stuff. But like, I'd probably say no too. Like, I don't know who you are.
Yeah.
I get it. So I think it's like I think that I went off on a tangent, but I'm always looking at ways like when I talk to guests who are really knowledgeable like yourself. I always look at ways that people can like take this and run with it, because in life, like all you have is how you respond and how you react to situations or not react to situations. Like what you do next is all you have in life. And I think it's just really important, like, that we take those and like that, like for 3 years he said no. It's like, but then he eventually says yes, right? I'm sure. Did he?
He did, yeah.
Okay.
And
there
that
you
was
go.
awesome too. But
Yeah,
like,
you're like, finally.
like that relationship got built because he was honest from day one. And it was like, whoa, I want to be in this dude's space, like no matter what.
Yeah.
And I have a similar standard of integrity, and he felt the same way. And like building relationships on that foundation is so energizing because I can trust him to say what's true and he can trust me to say what's true. Like we don't have to hide anything. It feels amazing. So like, we're talking about application for listeners. Like, let's jump straight to it. One of my dear friends' dad died suddenly. And I see, death happens all the time. I've worked in hospice. I watched 800 people die. Like, it happens a lot. And for whatever reason, like, it impacted me so much to see him, like, grieve so hard because his dad was so relational.
Mm.
And, like, nobody gets, and his dad was on a ventilator for, like, 2 weeks and stuff and went unconscious. And there were these moments of, like, I wish I would have worked less, and I wish I would have told my dad that I loved him before he went under.
Mm.
And so, like, practical application, like, you know, if we talk about deathbed goals, like, what
Mm-hmm.
has to happen for you to be free and easy and clean at death?
Yeah.
And like, can I live from that place right now today? If I want to feel energized, yeah, I have to. You
Right.
know, like,
Yeah.
for anybody listening right now, here's the exercise. There's one person you need to send a text to. Take the first name that comes to you, write it down, and either right now as you're listening, send that text, or by the time we finish, send that text. Please commit
Yeah.
to this. Whatever name came to you, like, take that action. And I
Yeah.
got my name.
I got my name.
Right. So y'all, like, send the text. Like,
Yeah.
relationships are the point. Without relationships,
Yeah.
why be in business?
Yeah. I'm there with you. One of my favorite things when I'm teaching sales is and training in sales is like, or just like selling in general, is like this art of connection and like connecting with people, right? Um, because in sales, like it is a lot of relationships, but we have to figure out, like, salespeople and business owners who are like doing this thing. Like sometimes you have to figure out how to connect, like quicker than developing a relationship, right? Because like
Sure.
when I hear relationship, that's long term, and it should be long term, by the way. And I think that sales is a long game and business is a long game, but to like win that relationship, I think connecting with a person is like how you start, and how do you connect with people like that. My thing is empathy, right? Like, how do you just, and I'm not perfect at it, right? Like, and I don't think anybody ever will be, but I think the point is when you focus on just like living with integrity and like living with this idea, right? That's like a very Stoic principle for me, like memento mori, right? Like, remember you will die. Like, if this is the last conversation that I ever have on this earth, like, how do you want to leave it?
Yeah. Like, did I go
Yeah.
full out? Like, did I say
Yeah.
I love you when I felt I love you?
Yeah,
You know what I
exactly.
mean? With parents, with kids, with whoever. Like, dude, I walked into Whole Foods Market the other day. It was like 7:04, you know. I was on a quest to get my wife celery for her detox thing.
Yeah.
And the dude stocking the celery was just like, hey, like, lit up, like, eye contact. I was just like, what? It's 7 in the morning, dude. Like, I don't know what he's on, but I want some of it. Like,
Right.
it totally changed my day. And like, you better believe
Yeah.
I'm coming back to Whole Foods. And it's like you said, you know, relationship can be
Yeah.
long term, but like, this was a moment. How many people is he going to see in a day?
Right, right,
You
right,
know,
right.
but
And that,
like,
like, that connection that happens, that makes you say, like, I'm coming back to Whole Foods for sure.
right.
Yeah.
Like,
That
that's what makes life worth living, right? That's the high of
yeah.
business. That's the high of,
And
like,
that's
I'm connecting customers with value. They really wanted this thing, they had this
yeah.
problem, and I get to provide a solution. Is there anything cooler in the world that
Right.
I get to do than like provide solutions and massive value to people?
Yeah,
Whether
yeah.
that's like connecting me with celery, or whether that's like, you know, I'm adding 30K to clients, like, it's all the
Yeah.
same. It's these human interactions. It's these brief moments of presence
Yeah.
that like make life so freaking good.
Yeah, I like that you said that, moments of presence, because for me that's what it is. It's like being present, being with whoever. And I heard, I mentioned his name earlier, but I heard Jay Shetty say that one time, and how he was like, people don't want 100% of my time, they want 100% of my energy.
Yo.
You know what I'm saying? And yeah, he said that. I was like, dang. He's like, you don't want me for five. He's like, you don't want half of my energy for an hour. You want
Right.
all of my, yeah, you want all of my energy. And he's like,
Yeah,
and so sometimes,
I'm in my
yeah, he goes,
DMs. I'm trying to talk to my kids. I'm
yeah,
trying to talk to my wife. Like, no, 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 no. I
yeah,
want
yeah, yeah,
all
yeah.
of you.
Yeah. And so he's like, and so he said something really cool. He was like, all of me sometimes requires that you only get me for 5 minutes or 1 minute or not today. Like, you want all of my energy, I can't do it today. You know what I mean? And so when that switched for me, when he said that, that's when it switched for me. Was he was like, you don't want 60 minutes of my time, you want 60 minutes of me. And I'm like,
So
yeah, I'm like,
powerful.
I was like, that is cool. I was like, yeah, you're right. Shoot.
Right. And at what level is Jay Shetty valuing himself
To be
when
able
he
to say something like,
when he
yeah,
thinks in that way, right? Like that's what
yeah,
gets
man.
me lit too. Like, yo,
Yeah,
I get to value myself at this level of like my presence is precious.
yeah, yeah.
So I get to be real intention with where my presence is going. You know,
Right.
if I'm gonna watch a whole bunch of like basketball clips, like cool, set a timer and be all in on YouTube basketball clips, you know?
I think that's it, right? I think it's like giving your full energy where it needs to be, and then obviously, you gotta prioritize and do all that stuff. I I read a book called The One Thing, and he talked
Mm.
about, what's the one thing I need to do next. I think I read that book really early on in my career, and I never took another time management class ever again. Like, when
Like
I
that's
learned how to
it.
answer, yeah, I'm like, that's the question. Like, what's the one thing I can do right now to make everything easier or obsolete? All right, that's what, okay. And so I think that part's great. So let me ask you this. I like to go into people's story. Yeah, I mean, we that intro usually lasts like 10, 15 minutes, but sometimes it goes 35 like it did today. But I'm curious, like, what got you into coaching? What made you take this path? Um, I know from previous conversations with you, you were in a different, and you mentioned earlier in this conversation, you were in hospice, you were in a different profession, but something clicked, made you switch. I'm curious.
Yeah, so I went to college for a music degree, drums.
Okay.
Thought I was gonna be a band teacher. Um, I've always
Nothing wrong.
coached,
Yeah, nothing wrong with a band teacher.
no matter where I've
Yeah.
been. And I was working in hospice, sitting bedside with folks, bringing music to the bedside, working as a chaplain, spiritual services, looking for meaning, looking for purpose, and just listening. Crying with people when it was time to cry, being scared to die when it was being scared to die, being freaking pissed when it was time to be angry, being joyful when it was time to be joyful. Like it was one of the most sacred experiences of those 7 years, like deeply, deeply, deeply formative.
Hmm.
And one thing I noticed with the dying process was like nobody, I mean, some people talked about like, yeah, he did such and such in his career, and he made an airplane, like built from scratch an airplane, and here's all the pictures.
Yeah.
Every single one of them, it was so much more about like presence and holding their hand and breathing with them until there were no more breaths. And for some families, that ripped them apart.
Hmm.
And I started noticing these deficits in like, as Americans, we are not comfortable with emotion.
Yeah. Well, and when you talk about death, like, we're just so far away from death that,
We're not
like,
comfortable with death.
period.
I love medicine. I love Western medicine. Deeply
Yeah.
grateful for it. So much of it is driven by we're afraid of death.
Oh yeah. I was gonna say, like, what you said and what I've said it before out loud, and I'll stand by it. But, like, you know, 100 years ago, what was our average lifespan? Not 87.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? 150 years ago is probably like 40 or 50, like 30, 40, 50, right in there.
Right.
35, 45, something like that, give or take. And the further we get away, the further we live, I mean, obviously, and I mean, it makes sense, right? The further we live, the further away from death we get, and the more uncomfortable it becomes, right? Like, people are like, oh, if I get hurt, I'll just go to a hospital. And yeah, and I'm on your side. Like, hospitals are great. But I don't think that's the point. That's not the point, like, you and I are trying to make.
Like, where's the quality of life?
Exactly. Amen.
Where's the connection with another
Yep.
mammal,
Yep.
another human being?
Yep.
And how, yes, we fight for life. And as I
100%.
watch people get comfortable with death, and as I got comfortable with death, like it helped me get comfortable with emotion. And this is part of what, I started seeing this deficit of like People are super uncomfortable with endings and death. People are super uncomfortable with emotion. And like every single person at end of life wishes they would have done their relationships differently.
Yeah.
And it was like, yo, I feel called to make waves in this and get to it earlier.
Yeah, I love that.
And so that's what led into coaching, and that's what led to play in the relationship space, and that's what led into like yeah, we can focus on profit and strategy and sales, and that's a super fun game. And at the same time, like it's so deeply rooted in people. And if I'm not taking care of business at home, what is the point?
Yeah. Well, and like, like I mentioned earlier, it's like if you're the same things that make you successful there, make you successful in your business. And I've seen it, like when you're not doing the things that, like these micro habits, if you're not doing the things that make you successful in your life, they're probably not translating into the things that make you successful in your business. And that's the thing with, I love James Clear's book, right? We mentioned it, Atomic Habits. But this is something that I always struggled with in sales because I'm, like I said, I'm very stoic, and the one thing there is like one of the main things is realizing the paradox of control, which is like the less you realize you have, the more you gain. And and when you start to learn what you can control, you realize it's very little, like so much less than what you thought it was. You know what I mean?
Right. And like our kids break that out of us.
Yeah.
Man, watching my kids hurt, that's like a whole different.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Absolutely. Well, and I mean, and I was having a conversation with this on another podcast. Like the hardest thing, he was like becoming a new parent. His wife was pregnant at the time. He's like talking about fatherhood. I'm like, I don't know if you should be asking me these questions, but I've learned that one of the hardest things about being a dad is realizing that you can't step in certain places. Like, it's like a football coach, right? Like we always have like our football coach, your wrestling or your band coach, whoever would say like, I can't do it for you. And we would always just be like, we'd always just like take that lightly. Like, oh yeah, that'd be funny if coach ran out in football pads and started playing with 18-year-olds, right?
Yeah, like he jumps in at right guard and just like
right. And we think like, we think that can't means won't.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But that can't means like cannot.
Like he's on the sideline.
Yeah, like literally, like there's a line there. There's
like there's a penalty when he comes. Yeah.
Well, yeah, a penalty, but like you can't. Like I can try to do stuff and like, but there's some things that you can't do. Even if you wanted to, you couldn't do it. And it's just that's the hardest. That was the hardest lesson for me to learn. Because you want to just get in and fix everything, right? Like we're dudes, we got to fix everything.
Deeply relate. Deeply relate.
Yeah, one of my favorite videos is that video. It's not about the nail. It's super famous. The super famous. Yeah. The girl has the nail. And she's like, my head hurts, and the guy's like, well, you have a nail in your head, and that just teaches you about communication.
If I could just fix you, then you wouldn't have emotion, and everything would be fine.
Of course. It's a great video. I love that.
I love what you mentioned. You talk about sales training and how like the connection has to happen before you invite somebody into some kind of exchange.
Yeah.
Because like so much of our society is built on taking.
Right.
And it's built, the housing's doing whatever it's doing right now. And it's like crazy competitive. And it's like families are fighting other families for space. And it's like, this doesn't have to happen. Like there are other options here. Like it's a really big world, and a lot of us have really big houses. And there's like every contractor I know has been like busting it.
Yeah.
For like 18 months trying to get stuff. There's no shortage of resources here. Like the only lack is up here.
Yeah. Well, and just realizing that like you can't control. I interview a lot of amazing people, and one phrase I hear over and over again that I just heard recently was like, everything happened exactly how it was supposed to happen. Or like, my grandpa used to say, and he said this from a church pulpit, and he would say like, you are where you're supposed to be. And he was reminding all of us that we were supposed to be at church. But as I got older, I realized that statement was like for life. Like you are exactly where you're supposed to be right now. Like
we're
nowhere
on
else.
time.
Yeah. We are on time.
Russell Brunson posted something the other day that was like
Yes.
average millionaire age is 55 and average CEO age is 57. And it's just the bottom is
Yeah.
just like, hey, good things take a while to cook. Like keep at it.
Yeah. Amen.
Like,
Amen.
we're right where we're supposed to be. Like
Yeah.
Big Shout
You're
Grandpa,
exactly.
like we're right on time.
Yeah.
The only question is like check in with self, check in with God. Like, what is the
Yeah.
next step? Where do we go next
Right.
from here?
Yeah, and I think a lot of this is very intuitive. You read those posts all the time. They're like, no one can tell you where you're supposed to be next. And there's a lot of truth to that because I've just seen another thing I've learned in these episodes is like I've I've never I've never heard somebody once say that what they were doing at the time I was talking to them was exactly what they planned to be doing. Like I knew exactly you know what I mean? Like I go, how'd you start this business? They're like, wild story, man. I
Right.
actually didn't know this fell in my lap, or like I took a wrong turn because I had, because I had to go to the bathroom and boom, there it was. You know what I'm saying? Like I've
Yeah,
never heard. Yeah,
we were in disaster and it was like the one way to get the bills. Like this is my one chance, backs
yeah,
against the ropes. Like we had to do it. Like if we hadn't
right,
been broke, we wouldn't have even started this thing.
right, right. Yeah, exactly. Like I've never met an entrepreneur on or off the podcast who said like, nope, this was like when I was 5, I had this written out. You know what I mean? Like it was never, or like when I was 18 or when I was 25, like I had this written out and I knew exactly what was, never, ever. And so yeah, you're right. Like you just never know what's going to happen, and so just be here. You're like, okay, it's not a big, you know what I mean? Like it's all going to be fine. It'll be fine. Like it comes. I wrote this. Uh, um, I wrote this, but one of my favorite passages in the Bible or scripture, whatever. And it's actually found a few other places, but and it came to pass. Like that's one of my favorite ones. Like it because like it always passes. Like good things, bad things, terrible things, excellent thing. Disneyland or eviction. It all passes, right?
Every wave is gonna break.
Yeah, it's got to. It has to. Um and so it's just having that relationship and relationship with like fate, you know? Like cuz my relationship with God is unique. I don't think that, and I imagine from our conversations that you'd probably agree with me, but I don't think he's like a puppet master, and I don't think he has a sick sense of humor. Yeah, you know what I mean. Like, I just think that fate is, it's part of it is like this relationship with fate. Like things are going to happen, and I'm just going to have to learn how to accept it, right?
I love what you said about control, man. Like that's it. Like the more I let go of this illusion of control, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
control of my wife, control of my kids, control of my
Right.
business, control of my
Yeah.
clients' outcomes. Like all I can
Yeah.
do is serve. All I can do is ask, like, hey, what's next?
Yeah. Exactly.
Show
I
me where to
remember.
add value next.
Yeah, exactly. I remember having a conversation I was like a new dad, and I had a buddy, and we were eating at Buffalo Wild Wings, and he was like, he brought up kids. Like I never asked somebody if they're gonna have kids because I just, I mean,
It
I
can be
just
a
leave
hot
that alone.
topic. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all up to you, man. But he brought it up, and he was like, and I heard from a probably one of my books or whatever. He was like, "How do you raise your kids?" And I was like, "Man, I don't know if you do raise kids. Like I'm from Iowa, like you raise corn and cattle.
You raise
You know what I mean?
beef, yeah.
Like, yeah, you raise those kinds of things." I'm like, but kids are just, I have a son and a daughter, and they are so different from each other, and I don't parent them really any different. But they're completely different people, and they're different from me. And I'm like, all right, it's wild.
Was
And then
was
you,
Go
yeah, go
ahead.
ahead. No, go ahead.
I was curious, what is like the coolest thing your daughter brought you in the last 2 weeks?
Oh, what she brought? Oh, okay. Yeah, she brings me. It wasn't one specific thing, but when we're having conversations or she's doing alone time, she always brings me drawings. Like that's her thing. She just the dad, I drew you this, dad, and I got a bunch of them, right?
It's like
Because
her heart on a page. Like, here you go.
yeah. There you go. And always, I'm proud of you. It looks beautiful. I love it, because it's not about the what's on the page. It's about the
The exchange.
meaning. It's about the time, right? Like, I never got on board with like, this is a bad drawing. Why don't you tell her it's a bad drawing? Because it's not a bad drawing. Like, this is an expression, right? Like, I saw a Banksy sell for millions of dollars and then shred automatically when it got, and people still, and then it got, and actually gained more value. Okay. Like, he ruined it on purpose.
Right.
And they charged more for it afterwards. It's bananas, but it's cool. Like, it's just this.
Right.
Yeah. So that's it. Yeah. I get a lot of those, and it's wonderful. And it's beautiful. Yeah. It's absolutely beautiful. So that's it, man. I think that I think we've had an amazing conversation, a lot to unpack. I love these conversations. We can touch on really good topics and also keep it light. So I love that. But before I let you go, tell everybody where they can find you, how they can, if they, looking for your services, where they can go to read more of your stuff and learn more.
Best place would be to have a conversation with me.
Absolutely.
That's my favorite. Let's be face to face. Let's, even if it's Zoom to Zoom. Start there. You can find me, Daniel Adams, on Facebook. If that doesn't work for whatever reason, www.theintimacybridge.com. You can read about what clients are creating. You can read about what coaching could look like. You can read about my wife and I and our wild journey through this life and through marriage and through business. And
cool.
That's a great spot.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being on, Daniel. Really appreciate you.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate the kindness I feel from you, your wealth of knowledge, depth.
Absolutely.
All of it.